Juliana. I am a fourth-year student majoring in political science with minors in French language and philosophy.
And hello, my name is Naz. I'm a third year student majoring in cinema and Italian studies and minoring in Italian communication and culture. And today we have a very special guest. Hello, Professor Legge.
Hi. I'm Elizabeth Legge. I'm a professor in the Department of Art History, and I teach a summer abroad course in Siena, in Italy.
And what is the name of this course that you teach?
I believe I called it something really original, like modernism in Italy. It's about the 20th century history of modernism in Italy, in the sense that Italy was late coming to the game of modernity, industrialization, and so on and so forth. And so it's really a history going back to the early 20th century with the Italian futurists who had fantasies about machines and speed and manliness and things. And then about how they became enmeshed with the rise of the system, if you can call it that, of fascism in Italy, which makes Italian modernism kind of a really interesting case study, because it really, in the beginning, was absolutely, up until the end of the Second World War, tied in with this totalitarian political ideology. So perhaps it's a modernism that's harder to love, but that's what the course is about. But then it's also about contemporary Italy. Looking at the kinds of artists, post-war, major Italian artists, who I felt, I'll come back to this, who I felt had been left out of mainstream, Western art history surveys. So it's sort of bifurcated. There are two parts. There's the history of Italian modernism, and then, to the degree possible, looking at what art has been since the Second World War up until the present in Italy.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So why was Siena selected for this course, and how has your background shaped your approach to teaching this course in Siena?
What I could say was, first of all, the summer abroad program in Siena was established a long time ago in Wordsworth College. I think it was the first summer abroad program. And it really was an initiative that grew out of the fact that there was interest on the part of the University of Siena in actually Toronto. They had a center, Toronto, Siena. And naturally, in its original form, that summer abroad program focused on teaching Italian language and culture in Siena, and then increasingly diversified, so that when I started to do it in 2006, there had long been art historians, but they tended to be people who worked on Renaissance or medieval, obviously, because Siena is a powerhouse of a medieval city with extraordinary medieval museum. So how did I get away with teaching modernism in Italy? The Department of Art History here thought it would be a valuable and interesting thing for students to think about Italy not just as a museum, but also as a vibrant, living place, right? I think students get the best of both worlds in Siena. That's my answer. I didn't pick Siena, but having been allocated Siena, have really, really tried to expose students both to that history of the town, the cultural history of Siena, but also then make them acutely aware of how interesting it is to establish things that are modern within that framework. And I can come back to that, because I know you have other questions that'll probably touch
Thank
on them.
you. That's wonderful. We were also wondering what locations will be included for field trips and what were your primary factors in deciding to pick these locations?
Well, one of the first things, it started in 2006, having been told, yeah, sure, teach a course on modernism in Italy. And then I thought, you know, I knew I wanted there to be a contemporary component, not just historical futurism, fascism. So what I did was I used the resources of the internet and found that there'd been this incredibly innovative program instituted in part by a fantastic contemporary art gallery in San Gimignano, okay, another juncture of the arch medieval and arch contemporary. The Galleria Continua in San Gimignano instituted a program in the provinces of Siena, in the areas of Siena. Siena is not just a city, it's a basically ancient kingdom, historically the great enemy of Florence. So the contemporary art projects that were initiated by the Galleria Continua were in the hill towns of Siena, Tuscany, Sienese, Tuscany. And it's extraordinary. There are major, major works of art by really leading contemporary artists, temporary and permanent installations in such towns as San Gimignano, where everybody wants to go anyway, because it's like Siena, another medieval masterpiece that's more or less intact. But so we can go to those places, we can go to the Tuscan hill towns and see really major works of contemporary art, but in that context. So it's almost like a textbook of what I dreamed about, which was showing students how you can be revere antiquity, the medieval, early modern, and so on, and yet incorporate the living contemporary world. There are absolutely amazing things. For example, in Colle di Delsa, where I do a walking tour. In hill towns, the Sienese province, that was the first thing, and it seemed really legitimate because it connected to Siena itself and the history of Siena as the great enemy of Florence. Unfortunately, depending on your point of view, Florence won. And then another site is Venice, because Venice has become one of the Italian cities with extraordinary collections of contemporary and modern art, starting with Peggy Guggenheim's beautiful museum, which goes back to the pre-World War II period, but is an enchanting place with great historical modernist work in it. And then also the French Mecenas, Francois Pinault, Salma Hayek's father-in-law, has a huge and very important art collection based in Siena in two sites, the beautiful Palazzo Grassi on the Grand Canal and at the old Customs House in Venice, which has been beautifully renovated. So these are showcases more for contemporary art, the Pinault collection. And there's also a Prada collection. So Venice has become has long, for a long time, had the Venice Biennale of contemporary art. But even when we're there in non-Biennale years, there are incredible modern and contemporary art resources in Venice. Plus, you get to see Venice, which is one of the phenomena of the world as a place to go. The third place is Rome, which is, again, hardly needs any excuses. But what I discovered early in building this course, which has been built over, I guess I've taught there 8 times, right? So every time it evolves. There is a really underused, underappreciated, and magnificent gallery, the National Gallery of Modern Art. in the Borghese Gardens. So we try to do one visit where we start with fascist modernism, which was that Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator between 1922 and 45, attached great importance to the story that what he was recreating was the great empire of Augustus in the early Common Era. So there was a great Roman altarpiece, the Ara Pacis or Pacis, depending on your Latin, Ara Pacis, which Mussolini had reassembled. And it really is the most extraordinary, gigantic, beautiful marble sculpture covered in bas reliefs, historically important bas reliefs. But the reason it comes into my course is Mussolini had a modernist architect design the container for the Ara Pacis. So it was a perfect example of fascist modernism and fascist fantasies of recreating a Roman Empire, housed in an effort to be modern. The Mussolini building, really controversially, was demolished when about nearly 20 years ago and replaced with a beautiful modern building, which caused huge controversy in Rome because people were attached to the old dingy Mussolini building. So it's a really great place to start because I can connect it to efforts to modernize what, again, in the context of efforts to recreate the Roman Empire. And then we walk up to the National Museum of Modern Art through the Borghese Gardens and end up walking through the Borghese Gardens to the Villa Borghese, which has the most extraordinary collection of both early modern and Baroque art. And the reason it's related is because while the Italian futurists said they wanted to throw out all that early modern garbage, that it was effeminate, it was the kind of junk they peddle in Florence, while the futurists had all this bravado about getting rid of historical art, you can see all the time how closely the Italian futurists were indebted to the Baroque, to artists like Bernini and before him Caravaggio. So there's this very exciting ability in one day to move from fascist Romanism to Italian contemporary and modern. So those are the three main sites, Rome, Venice, and the Venice hill towns, but there's one more place, a very far-sighted Italian of means named Gori, Gori, set up an amazing sculpture park in Pistoia. It's a private sculpture park with a collection of some of the most major international artists and sculptors from the 1960s through to the 1990s. And it's private, but really wonderfully for us, the Gori Foundation and the curator there open for us, especially in August when, as Naz will know, all good Italians go into hiding. We get to go to the Gori Foundation and walk. It's really beautiful for about 3 hours through forests and olive groves and so on, seeing really major works of now modern, but then contemporary art in this historical situation. So the Gori Foundation has been very generous to us, and it's always a lovely field trip because it gets us out into the countryside, as well as the towns and cities.
That's perfect. Thank you for that. So are there any opportunities for students to interact with local artists or architects?
Informally, yes. I have students who have reached out to contemporary architects and artists. In Colle di Valdelsa, for example, there's an artist whose doors are open, right? You can go in and bug him anytime. And that opportunity is open to students. But as a formal part of the course, no, we haven't done that, mostly because the course is so intense and so compressed. Anyway, what we do have in San Gimignano at the Galleria Continua, which I've mentioned before, is access again to incredibly important contemporary artists. This past summer, it was Ai Weiwei, a huge exhibition of Ai Weiwei. And the director there and I don't know what her official title is, public outreach person, have been fantastic to our students. They've given them talks. They take them back into the storerooms so they can see things, that are not actually on display. They've taken them various years to places off site to have that kind of one-on-one contact, not specifically with the artists themselves. You never really want to victimize artists too much, but with the work. And I really want people, this is one of the real themes of the course, I want people to learn how to look at things, to pay attention to things. I mean, much more beyond the question of art or contemporary architecture, although we do look at those things. I want people to walk around looking at things. So for that reason, 2 of the course assignments are meant to give students the opportunity to write as if they were contemporary art writers or critics, and comment on works we've actually seen in these sort of miraculous locations, right? Their responses to them, to think about where they saw them. Say, if it was down in this park in a 14th century well in Poggibonsi, right? What does it mean to walk through that park and then down and find this beautiful medieval well? And see contemporary art there. So that's one aspect of it, is getting people to look at things that they see. Because one of the formative experiences of my life was when I was an undergraduate. I was at Cambridge University. I lived in a house with a Marxist economist. She said to me at the end of the BA course, she said, I don't know anything about art. And I said, come with me, kid. And I hauled her down to London through the National Gallery and the Tate Gallery. Of course, only looking at things that I already liked, because that's important for communicating your enthusiasm, right? You can't understand, or relate to absolutely everything. But part of training, really training yourself, is learning what you can respond to and how, giving yourself a vocabulary for it. And one of the most satisfying things of my life was many years later, this economist said to me, that really transformed the way I looked at the world. So I thought, great, that's what you want to do as a teacher, right? Provide those opportunities. But I'm also trying to give students their own voice, right? So it's not just in-class tests. In fact, it isn't in-class tests. It's writing exercises.
That's great.
Awesome.
We're also
and a journal. They're encouraged to keep a journal, especially noting things they see that they think reflect, say, unique aspects of Italian culture or manners or food ways or whatever it is, right? To keep a daily journal. And I get quite beautiful journals with sketches, especially from the architecture students. They do beautiful sketches of buildings and things, but also wonderful anecdotes about exchanges students have seen, even on a simple level, like such as the fact that if you go into a shop, there's more formality in Italy. You don't just go and say, hey, I want. You have to say, buongiorno, fajaldo, oggi, blah, blah, blah. And so watching those kinds of more formal transactions.
On a bit of a related note, then, is there any role or any specific role of the Italian language in enhancing the experience of students on the trip?
not by me, okay, because I deal with the, you know, the nuts and bolts of navigating, talking to the bus drivers, so on and so forth. But the program itself offers a sort of introductory, I don't want to say boot camp, I think they call it survival Italian, learning how to at least begin by speaking Italian. As we all know now, almost everywhere in Europe, people look at you sadly and start speaking English. But I think in Italy, particularly, more than France, they appreciate your addressing them in, this is such a generalization, having the courtesy to speak to people in their language, acknowledging their culture and language.
That's very important.
It is, but it's not an Italian language course, right? They also have those.
What impact have you witnessed your course has on students once they've completed it?
Well, a huge number of them ask me to write letters of reference when they apply to graduate school because I get to know them. I mean, that's one of the real joys of the course, right? You get to know the students, and it's absolutely been the best teaching experience of my 28 years teaching art history at U of T, because you form closer relationships. I don't mean in a creepy way. You just know who they are and what their names are and what they're interested in. And if you've been on enough buses together, you get to know people in a different way. And I've had many students stay in touch over the years, now nearly 20 years. They'll write and say, hey, now I'm doing this. Now I'm a specialist in wine and I specialize in Italian wine. And you go, great. It's not art history, but also a number of students have gone on in architecture, but no matter what fields they go on in, and I always tell them this, even if they feel when they're in Siena that that it's too hot, let's say, it stops mattering, and everybody looks back on it over and over. I have students saying that was one of the most amazing experiences.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
That's all
Oh,
the
it's a pleasure.
questions I have.